My mother-in-law spent 2 years taking her son to casinos and lending him money to feed his gambling addiction, then convinced him to bet our house in a fake poker game so she could legally steal the property my parents' hard-earned money bought, and he actually believed she was protecting our family. I, 34F, am writing this because I need to get it out somewhere and I don't know who to talk to anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. Phoenix and I met in college. His mother Riley never liked me from the start. She made comments about how I wasn't good enough for her son, how my family didn't have the same social standing as theirs, how I would hold Phoenix back from his potential. I tried to ignore it for years. Phoenix always told me she just needed time to warm up to me. My parents passed away in a car accident 6 years ago. It was sudden and horrible. They left me everything they had, which included their life savings of about $180,000. They had worked hard their entire lives. My father was a plumber and my mother worked at a grocery store for 30 years. Every penny of that money came from their sweat and long hours. When we got the inheritance, Phoenix and I decided to use it as a down payment on a house. We found a nice 3-bedroom place in a good school district. The down payment was $150,000. Here's where I made the biggest mistake of my life. Phoenix suggested putting the house only in his name. He said it would make the mortgage process easier since he had the higher credit score at the time. I had some medical bills from a surgery a few years back that had dinged my credit. He showed me paperwork from the bank saying a single applicant would get us a better interest rate. I trusted him completely. We were married. What was his was mine and what was mine was his, or so I thought. I signed papers agreeing to the arrangement. The house went into his name only. For years, everything seemed normal. We both worked. I did night shifts at the hospital and Phoenix worked at his family's real estate office. His mother owned the business and he was supposed to be learning the ropes to eventually take over. Our son was born a year after we bought the house. I took maternity leave and when I went back to work, we figured out a schedule where one of us was always home with him. About 3 years ago, things started changing. Phoenix began staying out late on weeknights. He said he was networking for the business or meeting with clients. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until 2 or 3 in the morning. I worked night shifts 3 times a week, so on those nights I wasn't even there to know what time he got in. On my nights off, I would wait up and ask him about his day. He always had an explanation ready. A client dinner ran late. He stopped for drinks with a potential investor. His mother needed him to handle an emergency property issue. I noticed money getting tighter. We had always kept separate checking accounts but had one joint savings account for household expenses and emergencies. The balance started dropping. When I asked Phoenix about it, he said the real estate market was slow and the business was struggling. He said his mother had to cut his salary twice. I offered to pick up extra shifts. I started working 4 nights a week instead of 3. The extra money helped but we were still just barely getting by. Last month was our 12th wedding anniversary. I had been planning something special for weeks. I arranged for our son to stay with my sister for the weekend. I made reservations at the restaurant where Phoenix proposed to me all those years ago. It wasn't fancy but it meant something to both of us. 2 days before our anniversary, Phoenix told me we needed to cancel the reservation. He said we couldn't afford to go out to eat. The business was doing worse than he thought and we needed to save every dollar. I was disappointed but I understood. I told him we could do something at home instead. I suggested cooking his favorite meal and watching a movie after our son went to bed. He barely responded. He just nodded and went to watch television. I should have seen it then but I didn't want to believe what was right in front of me. I spent the whole anniversary day cooking. I made lasagna from scratch, the way his grandmother used to make it. I spent 4 hours in the kitchen. I set the table with our wedding china that we never used. I lit candles. I sent our son to my sister's house around 5 in the evening. Phoenix was supposed to be home by 6. He walked in at 9:30. He didn't apologize for being late. He didn't comment on the table or the food or the candles. He sat down and ate without saying much of anything. I tried to start a conversation about our anniversary, about the 12 years we'd been together, about our plans for the future. He gave one-word answers. After dinner, he went upstairs and got in the shower. I sat at the table looking at the melted candles and the cold lasagna and wondered when everything had gone so wrong. The next day, I did something I had never done before. I had been saving money in a separate account that Phoenix didn't know about. Not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted to surprise him with something meaningful. For almost 3 years, I had been putting away $30 or $40 every month from my paychecks. Sometimes more if I worked overtime. I had saved up almost $1,400. I decided to use it to buy Phoenix a nice watch. He had mentioned wanting one for years but we never had the extra money. I went to the jewelry store and found a Tag Heuer on sale. It was $1,350 after tax. I bought it and brought it home. That evening, I gave it to him after dinner. I told him I had been saving for years to get him something special. I wanted him to know that even though money was tight, I appreciated everything he did for our family. He opened the box and stared at the watch for a long time. Then he started crying. Not happy tears. He put his face in his hands and his whole body shook. I asked him what was wrong. He couldn't speak for several minutes. When he finally looked up at me, his face was completely pale. He told me he had something to confess. He said he hadn't been working late. He had been going to a casino about 40 minutes from our house. He said it started small, just a few $100s here and there. Then it got worse. He had been taking money from our savings. He had taken cash advances on credit cards I didn't know existed. And then, 3 weeks ago, he did something that he couldn't take back. He gambled away the house. I didn't understand at first. I asked him what he meant. He explained that he had used the house deed as collateral in a private poker game. He lost. The house now belonged to someone else. Legally, we no longer owned our home. The person who won it was letting us stay there for now, but we would have to start paying rent. $2,000 a month. I asked him who won the house. He wouldn't look at me. He whispered that it was his mother. Everything stopped making sense. I asked him to explain how his mother ended up with our house in a poker game. He said she had been the one taking him to the casino. They had been going together for over 2 years. She taught him how to play poker. She gave him money to gamble with when he ran out of his own. And then one night, she suggested they play a private game, just the two of them. She told him it would be fun. She said she would go easy on him. That night, she brought up the idea of using the house deed. She told Phoenix that if he put up the deed and won, she would give him $200,000 to pay off all our debts and invest in the business. She said it was a sure thing because she would let him win. But if he lost, the house would go to her temporarily, just as a legal formality. She said it was a way to protect the asset from creditors since Phoenix had racked up so much gambling debt. She convinced him that this way, I couldn't take the house in a divorce if I ever found out about his gambling and decided to leave. Phoenix actually believed her. He thought he was protecting our family's assets by gambling the house away to his mother. He signed papers transferring the deed. He lost the game. And now his mother owned the house my parents' life savings had paid for. I left the table and went upstairs. I packed a bag. Phoenix followed me and asked where I was going. I told him I was taking our son and leaving. He started yelling that I was proving his mother right, that I was never truly committed to the marriage, that I was just looking for an excuse to take everything from him. I didn't respond. I called my sister and told her I was coming to pick up our son. Then I walked out. I've been staying at my sister's apartment for the past week. Our son thinks we're just having an extended visit with his aunt. I haven't told him anything yet. I don't know how to explain that his father gambled away our home to his grandmother. I don't know how to explain that the woman who sends him birthday cards and Christmas presents worked with his father to steal from us. I contacted a lawyer 3 days ago. She looked over everything and said this is one of the most clear-cut cases of fraud she's ever seen. The deed transfer can potentially be challenged because it wasn't a legitimate sale. It was a deliberate scheme to strip me of my marital property rights. The fact that my inheritance paid for the down payment makes it even worse. My lawyer is preparing a lawsuit to reverse the deed transfer and reclaim my portion of the home equity. Phoenix has been calling and texting nonstop. He says his mother promised she would give the house back once things settled down. He says I'm overreacting. He says the gambling is under control now and we can work through this. He doesn't seem to understand that the problem isn't just the gambling. The problem is that he conspired with his mother to steal from me. The problem is that he believed I was the enemy instead of his partner. I'm filing for divorce. I'm asking for full custody of our son. I'm suing for the return of my inheritance money. The lawyer said we have a strong case but it could take months or even years to resolve. In the meantime, I'm working as many shifts as I can to save money for a place of my own. I keep thinking about that watch. I spent 3 years saving money to give him something meaningful. He spent 3 years planning how to take everything from me. Update 1: I wasn't planning to update, but several people sent messages asking what happened. Some things have changed and some have gotten worse. First, the custody situation. Phoenix filed a counterpetition asking for joint custody. His lawyer argued that I took our son without permission and that constitutes parental alienation. My lawyer shut that down quickly by pointing out that I'm the primary caretaker and have been for 8 years. I do all the school drop-offs and pickups. I handle all the medical appointments. I'm the one on the emergency contact forms. Phoenix works irregular hours and travels for the real estate business. The judge granted me temporary full custody with supervised visitation for Phoenix every other weekend. Phoenix showed up to the first supervised visit 3 hours late. Our son sat in the visitation center waiting room with the monitor for almost the entire scheduled time. When Phoenix finally arrived, he said he lost track of time. He had been at his mother's house. Our son came home that night and didn't talk for the rest of the evening. He went to bed early without eating dinner. The second visit, Phoenix brought Riley with him. The monitor had to tell him that only approved individuals were allowed in the visitation room. Riley waited in the parking lot. When the visit ended, she tried to approach our son as we were leaving. I stepped between them and told her to stay away. She called me a vindictive woman who was poisoning her grandson against his family. I took our son's hand and walked to the car. She followed us screaming across the parking lot until security intervened. Now for the house situation. My lawyer filed the lawsuit to reverse the deed transfer. We included fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion of marital property. We also subpoenaed the casino records to document Phoenix's gambling history. What we found was worse than I imagined. Phoenix had lost over $340,000 in the past 2.5 years. The casino records showed he was there 3 to 4 nights every week. Sometimes he gambled for 8 or 10 hours straight. He took out cash advances from 14 different credit cards. He had taken loans from 3 payday lending companies. He forged my signature on 2 of the loan applications. But here's the part that made me physically sick. Riley wasn't just gambling with him. She was lending him money. The records show dozens of cash deposits into Phoenix's casino account, ranging from $2,000 to $15,000 at a time. She funded his addiction. She gave him enough money to keep him coming back but never enough to get ahead. She was deliberately keeping him in debt. My lawyer said this changes everything. It shows premeditation. Riley wasn't just enabling Phoenix's gambling. She was orchestrating it. The poker game where Phoenix bet the house wasn't random. It was the end goal of a 2-year plan. She fed his addiction, kept him desperate, and then offered him a solution that put my inheritance directly into her hands. We amended the lawsuit to include Riley as a defendant. We're now suing her for fraud, conspiracy, and intentional interference with marital property. We're also pursuing criminal charges for the forged loan applications. Riley responded by hiring her own lawyer. Her position is that Phoenix is an adult who made his own choices. She claims she was trying to help him by playing poker with him in a controlled environment instead of letting him lose money to strangers at the casino. She says the house was never meant to stay in her name permanently. She was holding it in trust until Phoenix got his gambling under control and could take it back without me taking half in the divorce. Her lawyer actually said that in court. He argued that Riley was protecting family assets from a potential divorce. The judge did not look impressed. The discovery process has been revealing. We got access to text messages between Phoenix and Riley. They go back 3 years. In the messages, Riley constantly refers to me as the gold digger, the leech, the mistake. She tells Phoenix that I only married him for money. She says I got pregnant on purpose to trap him. She calls our son my insurance policy. There's a message from 18 months ago where Riley tells Phoenix that I would take everything if we ever divorced. She says the only way to protect himself is to move assets out of his name. She suggests he start transferring money to her for safekeeping. The messages show he did exactly that. Over the next year, he transferred $47,000 from our joint savings to Riley's personal account. My lawyer says these messages are evidence of conspiracy. They show Riley had a plan and Phoenix followed it. The poker game wasn't a random bet. It was the final step in a scheme that had been in motion for years. I keep reading those messages. The way Riley talks about me, about our son, about our marriage. The way Phoenix never defends me or corrects her. He just agrees with everything she says. In one message, he calls me controlling because I asked him to be home for our son's 7th birthday. In another, he complains that I want to know where he is when he stays out late. Riley responds by telling him he's a grown man and doesn't owe me explanations. I showed some of the messages to my sister. She asked me why I stayed so long. I didn't have an answer. I guess I kept thinking things would get better. I thought Phoenix was stressed from work. I thought his mother would eventually accept me. I thought if I just tried harder, everything would work out. Our son asked me last week when we're going home. I didn't know what to tell him. I said we're staying with Aunt Lisa for a while because the house needs some repairs. He asked if his dad was fixing it. I said yes. He seemed satisfied with that answer. I haven't told him the truth. I don't know how. How do I explain that his father and grandmother worked together to steal from us? How do I explain that the house he grew up in isn't ours anymore? How do I explain any of this without destroying his image of his father? The lawyer says the case could take another 6 to 8 months to resolve. In the meantime, I'm working 6 nights a week. I'm exhausted all the time. I sleep during the day while our son is at school. My sister watches him in the evenings when I go to work. I'm saving everything I can for a security deposit on an apartment. Phoenix is still living in the house. Riley charges him the $2,000 rent every month. He's paying rent to his own mother for a house that my parents' money bought. I don't understand how he can live with himself. The watch I gave him was in the box of his belongings that I dropped off at the house last week. I asked my sister to do the drop-off because I can't stand to see his face. She said Phoenix answered the door and asked where I was. She told him to sign for the boxes and left. The watch was sitting on top of the pile. I hope he pawned it. At least then some good came from those 3 years of saving. Update 2: the lawsuit is moving forward but it's been slow. The judge ordered mediation before we go to trial. We had our first mediation session 2 weeks ago. It went exactly as badly as I expected. Phoenix and Riley showed up with their lawyers. We all sat in a conference room while a mediator tried to get us to reach a settlement. Riley's lawyer opened by offering to sell me the house for $400,000. That's $175,000 more than what we originally paid for it. When my lawyer pointed out that the house was purchased with my inheritance and should be returned at no cost, Riley's lawyer said the housing market had gone up and Riley had made improvements to the property. The improvements turned out to be a new mailbox and some landscaping. Maybe $2,000 worth of work. Riley wanted me to pay $175,000 extra for a mailbox and some bushes. My lawyer countered with our demand. Return the house with the deed transferred to my name only. Return the $47,000 that Phoenix transferred to Riley's account. And pay my legal fees, which are currently around $18,000. Riley's lawyer said those terms were unreasonable. He said Riley was a victim of her son's poor decisions and shouldn't be punished for trying to help family. The mediator asked Riley if she had any response. She looked directly at me for the first time since we sat down and said I should be grateful she's giving me the option to buy the house back at all. She said most people in her position would have evicted me immediately. I didn't respond. My lawyer told me before the session to stay quiet and let her handle it. So I sat there and watched Riley talk about how generous she was being while she tried to profit off stealing my parents' money. Phoenix didn't say much during the session. He sat next to his mother and stared at the table. At one point, the mediator asked him directly if he understood that his actions had legal consequences. Phoenix said he thought his mother was going to give the house back. He said she promised it was temporary. The mediator asked him if he had that promise in writing. He didn't answer. Towards the end of the session, Riley's lawyer brought up our son. He said that continuing this lawsuit was traumatic for the child and that I should consider settling for the sake of family harmony. My lawyer immediately objected and said our son's well-being was not a bargaining chip. The mediator agreed and told Riley's lawyer to focus on the legal issues. We didn't reach a settlement. The mediator said we were too far apart and recommended proceeding to trial. My lawyer was fine with that. She said the evidence is strongly in our favor and she's confident we'll win. But trials take time. The court date is set for 7 months from now. 7 more months of working 6 nights a week. 7 more months of living in my sister's spare bedroom with our son. 7 more months of not knowing if I'll ever get my parents' money back. There was one development that might help. The district attorney decided to pursue criminal charges against Phoenix for the forged loan applications. He was arrested 3 weeks ago. Riley paid his bail immediately. He's due in court next month. If he's convicted, he could face up to 3 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. My lawyer said a criminal conviction would strengthen our civil case significantly. Our son knows something is wrong now. He's not stupid. He's 8 years old and he can tell that his parents aren't just having a disagreement. Last week, he asked me if his dad did something bad. I told him that adults sometimes make mistakes and have to face consequences. He asked if he would still get to see his dad. I said yes, as long as his dad follows the rules set by the judge. He's been having nightmares. He wakes up crying and asking for his dad. I hold him until he falls back asleep. I don't call Phoenix to tell him about the nightmares because I know what Phoenix would say. He would blame me for taking our son away. He would say this is all my fault for not forgiving him and working on the marriage. I got a text from Phoenix's sister last month. She said she heard about what happened and wanted me to know that not everyone in the family supports what Riley did. She said she always knew her mother was controlling but she never thought it would go this far. She offered to testify on my behalf if needed. I thanked her and gave her information to my lawyer. Having someone from Phoenix's family acknowledge what happened meant more than I expected. For so long, I felt like I was the problem. Riley spent years making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was the one causing issues in the marriage. Having Phoenix's own sister say that Riley was the problem validated everything I had been feeling for 12 years. Phoenix's sister also told me something I didn't know. Riley did the same thing to Phoenix's father. She convinced him to put assets in her name to protect them from creditors. When he tried to divorce her years later, she had moved everything into her own accounts. He left the marriage with almost nothing. He moved to another state and started over. Phoenix was a teenager when it happened. He watched his mother systematically strip his father of everything he owned and he learned from her. I keep thinking about that. Phoenix saw exactly what his mother was capable of and he still let her do it to me. He knew the playbook. He knew how it would end. And he did it anyway. The house is falling apart. Phoenix's sister drives by sometimes and sends me photos. The lawn is overgrown. There are weeds everywhere. One of the shutters is hanging loose. The porch light is burned out. Phoenix isn't maintaining anything. Riley doesn't care because she's getting her rent money either way. That house was perfect when we moved in. I spent months decorating our son's nursery. I painted the kitchen cabinets myself. I planted flower beds along the front walkway. I made it into a home. And now it's rotting because the two people who conspired to steal it don't care enough to maintain it. My lawyer filed a motion asking the judge to require Phoenix to keep up with basic maintenance until the lawsuit is resolved. The hearing is next week. I don't know if it will make any difference. Even if the judge orders it, Phoenix has to actually do the work. Based on everything I've seen over the past 12 years, I'm not confident he will. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of working nights and barely seeing my son. I'm tired of living out of a suitcase. I'm tired of everything. But I can't stop now. If I give up, Riley wins. She gets to keep my parents' money. She gets to keep the house they paid for. And I walk away with nothing. My parents worked their entire lives for that money. I won't let it become Riley's prize for destroying my marriage. Update 3: The trial ended last week. The judge ruled in my favor on almost everything. The deed to the house is being transferred back to my name only. Riley has 30 days to vacate. Phoenix has already moved out. He's living in a rental apartment across town. The judge found that the poker game was a fraudulent transfer intended to deprive me of marital property. The judge also found that Riley knowingly participated in the scheme and acted with intent to defraud. Riley was ordered to return the $47,000 that Phoenix transferred to her account. She was also ordered to pay my legal fees, which ended up being just over $31,000. She tried to argue that she didn't have the money, but the discovery process revealed she has significant assets and real estate holdings. The judge wasn't sympathetic. The criminal case against Phoenix was resolved through a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of forgery. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but the sentence was suspended. Instead, he got 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction. He also has to pay restitution for the fraudulent loans. Phoenix's probation includes random drug and alcohol testing. His first test came back positive for alcohol. He violated probation within 2 weeks. There's a hearing next month to determine if he'll serve the original 18-month sentence. My lawyer said it's likely he will. The divorce was finalized. I have full physical custody of our son. Phoenix has supervised visitation twice a month. The visits are still supervised because of the probation violation. Child support was set at $800 per month, but Phoenix hasn't paid anything yet. My lawyer is working on a wage garnishment. Our son knows most of the truth now. I sat him down after the trial and explained it in terms he could understand. I told him that his father made some very bad choices involving money and that those choices hurt our family. I told him that his grandmother helped his father make those bad choices. I told him that we're going to be okay, but things are going to be different for a while. He asked if he could still see his dad. I said yes. He asked if he had to see his grandmother. I said no. He hasn't asked about her since. We moved back into the house 2 weeks ago. It felt strange walking through the door knowing it's mine now. Just mine. Phoenix's name is off the deed. Riley's name was never legally on it despite her best efforts. The house was worse than I thought. The lawn was completely dead. The kitchen sink was leaking and had caused water damage to the cabinet below. 2 windows were cracked. The carpets were stained. It's going to cost at least $8,000 to fix everything. I'm getting estimates this week. I'm still working night shifts, but I cut back to 4 nights instead of 6. I need to be home more for our son. He's struggling at school. His grades dropped. His teacher said he's been having trouble focusing. I'm trying to help him with homework, but nursing night shifts don't leave much energy for math problems. Riley sent a letter to my lawyer last week. She's appealing the judgment. Her lawyer says the judge made errors in applying the law and that the deed transfer was a legitimate transaction between family members. My lawyer said the appeal has very little chance of success, but it could delay Riley actually paying what she owes. I'm not surprised. Riley will do anything to avoid admitting she was wrong. She'll spend more money on lawyers to appeal a judgment she's going to lose anyway. That's who she is. Phoenix's sister came to visit last weekend. She brought our son a birthday present even though his birthday isn't for another month. She said she wanted to do something kind since the family had caused so much damage. She apologized for not speaking up sooner. She said she was afraid of her mother and didn't want to get involved. I understood. Riley is the kind of person who punishes anyone who goes against her. Phoenix's sister risked her relationship with her mother by testifying for me. She told the court about what Riley did to their father. She provided emails showing that Riley had bragged to her about getting the house from Phoenix. Those emails were crucial evidence. I thanked her. She asked if our son could spend time with her occasionally, away from Phoenix and Riley. She said she wanted him to know he had family who cared about him beyond the mess his father and grandmother created. I said yes. Our son needs positive relationships right now. The watch I gave Phoenix for our anniversary showed up in a pawn shop. A friend of mine saw it and recognized it because I had shown her a picture when I first bought it. She called me and I went to the shop. The owner said someone sold it to him 3 months ago for $400. He wanted $900 to sell it back to me. I didn't buy it. I walked out of the pawn shop and I haven't thought about it since. That watch represented 3 years of saving money for a man who was stealing from me the entire time. I don't want it back. I'm not okay yet. I don't know when I will be. I wake up angry most mornings. I look at our son and I see Phoenix's face and sometimes I have to leave the room. It's not our son's fault, but the resemblance makes everything harder. I'm trying to move forward. I got a promotion at work that comes with a small raise. I'm looking into day shift positions so I can have a normal schedule. I started taking our son to a counselor who specializes in children of divorce. The counselor said he's coping as well as can be expected given everything he's been through. Riley's appeal will probably fail. Phoenix will probably go to prison for violating probation. I'll probably spend the next few years paying off debt and fixing the house. Our son will probably have trust issues for a long time. But the house is mine. My parents' money won't end up in Riley's bank account. Phoenix can't gamble away anything else because there's nothing left to take. I don't feel victorious. I just feel tired. But at least I'm tired in my own house. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My mother-in-law broke into our house and destroyed my wedding dress while I was at work. The worst part is my husband helped her plan it. When I confronted them both, she said I deserved it for being a bad wife, and he still took her side. My husband Jonathan, 31M, and I, 28F, have been married for 3 years. His mother Grace, 56F, has always been difficult, but what happened last week crossed every line I thought existed. Let me give you some background first. Jonathan and I met in college and dated for 4 years before getting married. His mother Grace never liked me from the start. When we first started dating, she would make comments about how I wasn't good enough for her son. She told Jonathan I was too independent and that I would never make a good wife. During our engagement, she tried to convince him to call off the wedding multiple times. She said things like I was only marrying him for his money, which was ridiculous because we both work similar jobs and make about the same amount. The wedding planning was a nightmare because of her. She wanted to control every detail and threw tantrums when we didn't do what she wanted. She insisted on inviting her entire extended family, most of whom Jonathan barely knew. She also demanded that her best friend's daughter be one of my bridesmaids instead of my college roommate. When I said no, she didn't speak to us for 2 months. Jonathan always took her side during these fights, saying I needed to understand that she just wanted to be involved. After we got married, things got worse instead of better. She would show up at our house unannounced and let herself in with the spare key Jonathan had given her. I came home from work several times to find her rearranging our furniture or doing our laundry. When I told Jonathan this made me uncomfortable, he said his mom was just trying to help and that I should be grateful. She would also call him multiple times a day, sometimes even during our date nights or when we were spending time together. The breaking point came about 6 months ago when Grace started spreading rumors about me to Jonathan's family. She told his aunts and cousins that I was preventing Jonathan from visiting her and that I was trying to turn him against his own mother. None of this was true. I never stopped Jonathan from seeing his mother. I just asked that she call before coming over and respect our privacy as a married couple. But Grace twisted everything to make me look like the villain. Things escalated when Jonathan's cousin Phoebe, 29F, got engaged last month. Grace immediately started comparing Phoebe's relationship to ours, telling anyone who would listen that Phoebe was a much better partner than I was. She said Phoebe was more traditional and family-oriented, unlike me who was too focused on my career. This hurt because I work as a nurse and I've always been proud of helping people, but Grace made it sound like having a job was somehow wrong. The wedding dress incident happened last Tuesday. I keep my wedding dress in our bedroom closet in a special preservation box. It cost $1,200 and has sentimental value because my grandmother helped me pick it out before she passed away last year. My grandmother and I were very close, and choosing that dress together was one of our last special moments. I worked a double shift at the hospital that day and didn't get home until almost midnight. I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. When I woke up the next morning and went to get ready for work, I noticed something was wrong in our bedroom. The closet door was slightly open, which was unusual because I always keep it closed. Then I saw pieces of white fabric on the floor. I opened the closet and found my wedding dress box open and empty. The dress was on the floor, cut into pieces. Someone had taken scissors to it and destroyed it completely. The bodice was separated from the skirt, the sleeves were cut off, and there were random cuts all through the fabric. Years of careful preservation were ruined in one night. I started shaking and called for Jonathan, but he had already left for work. I called him immediately and told him what happened. He said he would come home right away. While I waited for him, I looked around the house for signs of how someone got in. The front door was still locked, and all the windows were secure. Then I remembered that Grace still had our spare key. When Jonathan got home, I showed him the destroyed dress and asked if he thought his mother could have done this. He looked shocked and said there was no way she would do something like that. He suggested maybe we had been robbed, but nothing else in the house was missing or disturbed. I told him I wanted to call the police, but he asked me to wait until we could figure out what really happened. That afternoon, Jonathan went to his mother's house to ask her about it. He came back and said she denied everything and seemed genuinely surprised when he told her about the dress. She suggested that maybe I had done it myself for attention or insurance money. This made me even more upset because not only was she destroying my property, she was now trying to make me look crazy. I decided to call Grace myself and confront her directly. When she answered the phone, I asked her straight out if she had been in our house and cut up my dress. She was quiet for a long moment, then said she didn't know what I was talking about. But her voice sounded different, like she was lying. I told her I knew she still had our spare key and that she was the only person who could have gotten in. That's when she finally admitted it. She said she had come over Tuesday night while we were both supposed to be asleep. She didn't know I was working late. She said she cut up the dress because she was tired of me acting like I was better than everyone else and that the dress represented everything wrong with our marriage. She said I had never deserved to wear such a beautiful dress because I wasn't a good enough wife for her son. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had broken into our house and destroyed something that meant everything to me, and she was acting like I somehow deserved it. I asked her how she could justify destroying something that belonged to someone else, especially something with such sentimental value. She said maybe now I would understand how she felt when I married her son and ruined their close relationship. This conversation happened while Jonathan was in the room with me, and he heard everything she said. I expected him to be as outraged as I was, but instead he just sat there looking uncomfortable. When I hung up the phone, I asked him what he thought we should do. He said maybe we should all sit down and talk about this like adults. I told Jonathan I wanted Grace to pay for a new dress and to return our spare key immediately. I also said I didn't want her coming to our house anymore without permission. Jonathan said those seemed like reasonable requests and that he would talk to his mother about making things right. The next day, Jonathan went to see Grace again. When he came back, he said she had refused to pay for the dress and that she thought I was overreacting. She said it was just a dress that I would never wear again anyway, so what was the big deal? She also said she wouldn't give back the spare key because Jonathan had given it to her and it wasn't my decision to take it away. At this point, I realized that Grace was never going to take responsibility for what she did or try to make it right. I also realized that Jonathan wasn't going to stand up to her in any meaningful way. He kept saying he understood both sides and that we all needed to find a way to get along. I started looking into filing a police report for breaking and entering and destruction of property. When I mentioned this to Jonathan, he got upset and said I was trying to get his mother arrested over a dress. He said his family would never forgive me if I involved the police, and that I was being vindictive. That's when I realized that Jonathan cared more about keeping his mother happy than protecting me or our marriage. After 3 years together, he was still choosing her over me when it really mattered. I told him I needed some time to think about everything, and I've been staying at my sister's house for the past 3 days. Jonathan has been calling and texting constantly, saying he wants to work things out. He keeps saying his mother was wrong but that involving the police would just make everything worse. He wants me to come home so we can move past this and focus on our marriage. But I don't know if I can move past this. It's not just about the dress, although that was important to me. It's about the fact that his mother violated our home and our privacy, destroyed something precious to me, and then refused to take any responsibility for her actions. And Jonathan is more concerned about protecting her from consequences than he is about how this affected me. I keep thinking about my grandmother and how excited she was when we found that dress together. She said it made me look like a princess and that she couldn't wait to see pictures of me wearing it on my wedding day. Now those pictures are the only place that dress exists anymore. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to file the police report anyway and let Jonathan deal with the fallout. Another part of me wonders if I should just cut my losses and start over somewhere else. I can't imagine living with someone who won't protect me from his mother's attacks, and I can't imagine having Grace as part of my life for the next however many years. Has anyone else dealt with something like this? How do you move forward when your spouse's family destroys your property and your spouse won't stand up for you? Update 1. I wanted to update everyone who commented on my original post about my mother-in-law Grace destroying my wedding dress. A lot has happened since then, and I need to get this all written down because I still can't believe how everything unfolded. First, thank you to everyone who validated my feelings and gave me advice. Reading your responses helped me realize I wasn't overreacting and that what Grace did was not normal family drama. Several people suggested I file a police report regardless of what Jonathan wanted, and others recommended I look into getting the locks changed. I wish I had listened to that second piece of advice sooner. After staying at my sister's house for a week, I decided to go back home and try to work things out with Jonathan. He had been calling me every day saying he missed me and that he had talked to his mother about boundaries. He promised that Grace had agreed to stay away from our house and that she understood she had crossed a line with the dress situation. I wanted to believe him because despite everything, I still loved my husband and wanted our marriage to work. We had built a life together, bought a house, adopted our dog Charlie, and I wasn't ready to throw all of that away without giving it one more chance. When I got home, Jonathan had cleaned the house and bought me flowers. He apologized again for not standing up to his mother sooner and said he realized he had been putting her feelings ahead of mine. He promised that from now on, our marriage would come first. We talked for hours about setting boundaries with Grace and about how to rebuild trust between us. For about a week, things seemed better. Grace didn't come by the house or call as much as usual. Jonathan was making an effort to spend more time with me and less time on the phone with his mother. I started to think maybe we could actually work through this and come out stronger. Then last Friday happened, and everything fell apart again. I was at work when my neighbor Mrs. Peterson called me. She's an older woman who lives next door and has always been friendly with us. She told me she had seen Grace's car in our driveway around lunchtime and thought I should know since Grace had been there for over an hour. This immediately made me suspicious because Jonathan was supposed to be at work, and we had agreed that Grace wouldn't come to the house anymore without both of us being present. I tried calling Jonathan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I was in the middle of a busy shift and couldn't leave right away, but I kept trying to reach him throughout the afternoon. When I finally got home that evening, Jonathan was already there making dinner like nothing had happened. I asked him about Grace's visit, and he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He claimed he had been at work all day and that his mother hadn't been to the house. I told him about Mrs. Peterson's call, and that's when his story started changing. First he said maybe Grace had stopped by briefly to drop something off. Then he said she might have come by to get something she had forgotten. Finally, He admitted that yes, she had been there, but it was only for a few minutes and nothing important had happened. I asked him why he had lied to me about it, especially after we had just agreed on complete honesty about his mother. He said he hadn't wanted to upset me over nothing and that he thought it would be better if I didn't know about every little interaction he had with Grace. This made me realize that Jonathan still didn't understand the problem. It wasn't about him talking to his mother, it was about him lying to me and breaking the agreements we had made together. I told him I needed to know the truth about what Grace had been doing in our house for over an hour. That's when Jonathan finally told me the real story. Grace had called him at work that morning crying and saying she needed to talk to him urgently. She said she was having chest pains and thought she might be having a heart attack. Jonathan immediately left work and met her at our house because she said she was too scared to drive herself to the hospital. When he got there, Grace was sitting in her car in our driveway looking fine. She said the chest pains had stopped but that she was still worried about her health. She asked if she could come inside to rest for a while before driving home. Jonathan let her in and made her some tea while she sat on our couch. According to Jonathan, they just talked about her health concerns and about how stressed she had been lately. She apologized again for the wedding dress incident and said she had been going through a difficult time emotionally. She promised Jonathan that she wanted to repair her relationship with me and make things right. But then Jonathan mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He said that while Grace was resting, she had asked to use our bathroom. She was upstairs for about 20 minutes, which Jonathan thought was strange, but he didn't want to question her if she wasn't feeling well. I immediately went upstairs to check our bedroom and bathroom. At first, everything looked normal. But then I noticed that some of my jewelry was in different positions on my dresser. My laptop, which I usually keep closed on my desk, was open. And when I checked my closet, I could tell that someone had gone through my clothes. I confronted Jonathan about this, and he insisted that Grace wouldn't have gone through our personal things. He said maybe I was remembering wrong about where I had left things. But I know my own belongings, and I know someone had been going through them. The next morning, I discovered what Grace had really been doing upstairs. I was getting ready for work when I noticed that my birth control pills were missing from my bathroom cabinet. I always keep them in the same spot, and they were definitely gone. I searched the entire bathroom and bedroom but couldn't find them anywhere. Then I checked the trash can and found the empty pill pack at the bottom, underneath other garbage. Someone had taken out all of my birth control pills and thrown them away. I called Jonathan immediately and told him what I had found. At first, he didn't believe me and suggested that maybe I had thrown them away myself and forgotten. When I insisted that wasn't true, he said maybe Charlie had somehow gotten into the cabinet and scattered the pills. But I knew what had really happened. Grace had gone through our personal belongings while Jonathan was downstairs, found my birth control pills, and destroyed them. This wasn't random or accidental. She had specifically targeted something that would affect my ability to control my own reproductive choices. When I explained this to Jonathan, he finally admitted that it was possible his mother had done it. But instead of being outraged like I expected, he asked me why it was such a big deal since we could just get a new prescription. I couldn't believe he was still minimizing his mother's actions. She had violated our privacy, gone through our personal belongings, and tampered with my medication. This wasn't about the cost of replacing the pills, it was about the fact that she felt entitled to interfere with the most personal aspects of my life. I asked Jonathan what he planned to do about this latest incident. He said he would talk to Grace and ask her to admit what she had done. When I said that wasn't enough and that I wanted him to demand she stay away from our house permanently, he said that would be too harsh and might damage their relationship permanently. That's when I realized that Jonathan was never going to prioritize our marriage over his relationship with his mother. No matter what Grace did, he would always find ways to excuse her behavior and minimize the impact on me. He was more worried about hurting his mother's feelings than protecting his wife from her attacks. I told Jonathan I was going back to my sister's house and that I needed time to decide whether our marriage was worth saving. He begged me not to leave again and promised that this time he would really set boundaries with Grace. But I had heard those promises before, and his actions had shown me that his words didn't mean anything. I've been at my sister's house for the past week, and Jonathan has been calling constantly. He says Grace has admitted to throwing away my birth control and that she's very sorry. He says she only did it because she wants us to have children and thought maybe if we had a baby, it would bring our family closer together. The fact that Jonathan thinks this explanation somehow makes Grace's actions acceptable tells me everything I need to know about where his priorities really lie. I'm starting to think this marriage might be over. Update 2: I've been putting off writing this update because I wasn't sure how much detail to include, but after what happened this week, I think I need to tell the whole story. The situation with Jonathan and Grace has gotten much worse, and I've discovered that their behavior was even more calculated than I originally realized. After my last update, I stayed at my sister's house for another 2 weeks while Jonathan continued to call and text me every day. He kept saying that Grace was sorry and that they both wanted to make things right. He suggested we all meet for dinner so Grace could apologize in person and we could start fresh. Against my better judgment, I agreed to one final conversation with both of them. I thought maybe if Grace could acknowledge what she had done and agree to stay out of our lives, there might be a chance to save my marriage. I told Jonathan I would meet them at a restaurant, not at our house, and that this was their last opportunity to make things right. We met at a chain restaurant near their neighborhood last Saturday afternoon. Grace was already there when I arrived, sitting next to Jonathan in a booth. She looked perfectly normal, not like someone who was sorry for destroying my property and violating my privacy. When I sat down, Grace immediately started talking about how glad she was that we could all be together as a family again. She said she had been praying for me to come to my senses and realize that family was more important than holding grudges. She never actually apologized for anything she had done. I asked Grace directly if she was sorry for cutting up my wedding dress and for going through my personal belongings. She said she understood why I was upset, but that sometimes people do things out of love that might seem hurtful at the time. She said everything she had done was because she wanted what was best for Jonathan and our marriage. When I asked her specifically about throwing away my birth control pills, she said she thought Jonathan and I should be focusing on starting a family instead of preventing one. She said most women our age were already mothers and that I was being selfish by putting my career ahead of giving Jonathan children. I pointed out that whether or not Jonathan and I had children was none of her business and that she had no right to interfere with my medical decisions. Grace said that as Jonathan's mother, she had every right to be concerned about his happiness and his future. She said if I really loved him, I would want to give him the family he deserved. Jonathan sat there through this entire conversation without saying a word to defend me or correct his mother. When I asked him directly if he agreed with what Grace was saying, he said he just wanted everyone to get along and that we should focus on moving forward instead of rehashing the past. That's when I realized this meeting was never about Grace apologizing, it was about them trying to convince me to accept her behavior and pretend nothing had happened. They wanted me to come home and continue the marriage on their terms, with Grace remaining involved in every aspect of our lives. I told them both that I couldn't do that and that I needed Grace to stay completely out of my life if there was any chance of fixing my marriage with Jonathan. Grace said that was impossible because Jonathan was her son and she would always be part of his life. She said if I couldn't accept that, then maybe I wasn't the right wife for him. Jonathan finally spoke up, but not to support me. He said his mother would always be important to him and that he hoped someday I could learn to appreciate her like he did. He said he didn't want to choose between us, but that he couldn't cut his mother out of his life just to make me happy. I left the restaurant that day knowing my marriage was over. Jonathan had made his choice, and it wasn't me. But the real revelation came this week when I went back to our house to get more of my belongings. Jonathan was at work, and I still had my key. I wanted to pack up my clothes and some personal items so I could start looking for my own apartment. While I was packing, I found a box of papers in Jonathan's nightstand drawer that I had never seen before. Most of it was random stuff, old bills, warranty information, things like that. But at the bottom of the box, I found a notebook that had Jonathan's handwriting in it. The notebook contained what looked like a timeline of events from the past few months. Jonathan had written down dates and notes about conversations he had with Grace about me. Reading through it, I realized that Grace's attacks on me hadn't been random acts of anger, they had been part of a planned campaign to drive me away. According to Jonathan's notes, Grace had started complaining to him about me shortly after we got married. She told him I was controlling and that I was trying to isolate him from his family. She suggested that maybe I wasn't as committed to the marriage as I seemed and that he should watch for signs that I was planning to leave him. The notes showed that Grace had been feeding Jonathan specific stories about me for months. She told him she had seen me having lunch with male coworkers and suggested I might be cheating. She said she had noticed that I seemed distant and unaffectionate and that maybe I was having second thoughts about being married. Most disturbing of all, the notes revealed that Grace had suggested destroying my wedding dress as a way to test my reaction. She told Jonathan that if I really cared about our marriage, I would forgive the dress incident and try harder to get along with her. But if I made a big deal about it, that would prove I cared more about material things than about family. The birth control incident had also been planned. Grace had convinced Jonathan that if we had a baby, it would strengthen our marriage and give me something to focus on besides my complaints about her. She suggested that maybe I needed a little push to realize that motherhood was more important than my career. What made this discovery even worse was that Jonathan had been documenting these conversations in detail, which meant he was actively participating in Grace's schemes against me. He wasn't just a passive victim of his mother's manipulation, he was helping her plan ways to control and manipulate me. The final entry in the notebook was dated the day before our restaurant meeting. Jonathan had written that Grace thought the dinner was a good opportunity to make me understand that she would always be part of our lives. If I couldn't accept that, then it would be better for everyone if I left permanently. Reading those notes, I realized that the past several months of my life had been orchestrated by my husband and his mother. They had been working together to make me feel crazy, isolated, and wrong about everything. When their subtle manipulation didn't work, they escalated to destroying my property and violating my privacy. I took pictures of every page in that notebook with my phone, then put it back where I found it. I finished packing my things and left our house for what I knew would be the last time. That evening, I sent Jonathan a text message telling him I had found his notebook and that I knew about his collaboration with Grace. I told him I was filing for divorce and that he shouldn't contact me anymore except through lawyers. Jonathan called me immediately, but I didn't answer. He left several voicemails saying the notebook didn't mean what I thought it meant and that he had only been trying to understand his mother's concerns about our marriage. He said he loved me and that everything he had done was because he wanted our marriage to work. But I was done listening to his explanations and excuses. For months, he had been pretending to be caught in the middle between me and his mother, when in reality he had been working with her against me the entire time. I met with a divorce lawyer yesterday, and she said I have a strong case for emotional abuse and destruction of property. She also said the notebook could be important evidence if Grace's harassment continues after the divorce. I'm staying with my sister while I look for my own place. It's been hard starting over, but also liberating to be away from the constant stress and manipulation. I finally feel like I can make decisions based on what's best for me instead of constantly trying to manage other people's emotions and schemes. Jonathan has been trying to contact me through mutual friends and family members, but I've asked everyone not to pass along his messages. I'm ready to close this chapter of my life and move forward without him or Grace in it. Update 3: This will be my final update on this situation. The divorce proceedings have been moving forward, and I wanted to share what happened during the final confrontation with Jonathan and Grace before I close this chapter completely. 3 weeks ago, Jonathan showed up at my sister's house unannounced. I wasn't there at the time, but my sister Katie told him I didn't want to see him and asked him to leave. He refused and said he needed to talk to me about some important information regarding our divorce. Katie called me at work to let me know Jonathan was there and wouldn't leave. I told her to call the police if he didn't go away, but she said he seemed calm and that maybe I should hear what he had to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to come home and listen to whatever he wanted to tell me. When I got there, Jonathan was sitting in Katie's living room looking terrible. He had lost weight and looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. He immediately started apologizing and saying he had made huge mistakes. He said he had been thinking about everything that happened and realized how wrong he had been. Jonathan told me that after I left, Grace had been calling him multiple times every day to complain about the divorce. She kept saying it was all my fault for being too sensitive and that Jonathan should find a new wife who would appreciate having such a caring mother-in-law. She also started pressuring him to fight the divorce and try to get me to come back. According to Jonathan, Grace's constant criticism finally made him realize how controlling and manipulative she had always been. He said he had been so used to her behavior his entire life that he didn't recognize it as abnormal until he started seeing it affect our marriage. Jonathan said he had decided to go to counseling to work on setting boundaries with his mother. He claimed he understood now that his first loyalty should have been to me and our marriage, not to keeping Grace happy. He begged me to give him another chance to prove he could change. I listened to everything Jonathan said, but I didn't believe him. He had made similar promises before, and his actions had never matched his words. I told him it was too late for counseling and second chances. Too much damage had been done for me to ever trust him again. That's when Jonathan told me the real reason he had come to see me. He said Grace had been talking about doing something to interfere with our divorce proceedings. She had been asking questions about my lawyer and about what kind of settlement I might get. She also mentioned that she knew where I was staying and that maybe she should pay me a visit to convince me to be more reasonable. Jonathan said he was worried about what his mother might do and that he wanted to warn me to be careful. He also said he had finally told Grace that their relationship was over if she didn't stop interfering in his life, but he wasn't sure she believed him. I thanked Jonathan for the warning, but I told him this conversation didn't change anything between us. The divorce was still moving forward, and I still didn't want him in my life. I asked him to leave and not contact me again. After Jonathan left, I called my lawyer to tell her about Grace's potential plans to interfere with the divorce. She advised me to document any contact Grace tried to make and to call the police immediately if she showed up at Katie's house or my workplace. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Grace appeared at the hospital where I work. She came to the nurse's station during my shift and asked to speak with me privately. My supervisor happened to be nearby and asked Grace if she was a patient or family member. When Grace said no, my supervisor told her she couldn't be in the patient care area without authorization. Grace became agitated and started talking loudly about how I was her daughter-in-law and that she had important family business to discuss with me. She said I was destroying her son's life and that someone needed to talk sense into me before I made a terrible mistake. Security was called when Grace refused to leave the unit. She kept saying she just needed 5 minutes to explain everything to me and that I would understand once I heard her side of the story. The security guards had to escort her out of the building while she was still talking about how ungrateful and selfish I was being. My supervisor filed an incident report about Grace's visit, and I gave a copy to my lawyer. We used this incident as evidence that Grace was harassing me and potentially interfering with my ability to work. My lawyer sent Grace a cease and desist letter warning her to stay away from me and my workplace. The letter must have made an impression because Grace hired her own lawyer. Her attorney contacted mine to say that Grace felt she was being unfairly blamed for the breakdown of my marriage. Grace wanted it on record that she had always tried to have a good relationship with me and that she was hurt by my accusations against her. Grace's lawyer also claimed that Jonathan's notebook was being taken out of context and that the conversations documented in it were just a concerned mother trying to help her son work through marital problems. They said Grace never intended to cause any harm and that she was willing to apologize if that would help resolve the situation. My lawyer responded that Grace's apologies weren't sufficient given the pattern of harassment and property destruction. We made it clear that I wanted no contact with Grace going forward and that any further interference would result in additional legal action. The divorce was finalized last week. Jonathan didn't contest any of my requests, which surprised me. I got to keep most of our shared belongings, including our dog Charlie. Jonathan kept the house, but he had to buy out my portion of the equity. I also received compensation for my destroyed wedding dress and other damaged property. At the final hearing, Jonathan's lawyer mentioned that Jonathan was planning to move to a different state for a new job opportunity. I don't know if this is true or if it's just his way of getting away from the situation he created with his mother. I haven't heard from Grace since her lawyer contacted mine, and I hope it stays that way. I changed my phone number and asked my workplace to flag her name in case she tries to contact me there again. Moving forward has been easier than I expected. I found a nice apartment close to Katie's house, and I've been spending more time with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. It's amazing how much energy I have now that I'm not constantly dealing with Grace's drama and Jonathan's inability to stand up to her. I've also been dating someone new. His name is David, and he's a teacher I met through mutual friends. The best part about David is that he has a normal relationship with his family. His parents are kind, respectful people who treat me well without trying to control every aspect of our relationship. When I told David about everything that happened with Jonathan and Grace, he was shocked that any mother-in-law would think that kind of behavior was acceptable. He said his own mother would be horrified if she acted that way towards someone he cared about. It's been refreshing to be with someone whose family operates by normal boundaries and respect. I know some people might think I gave up on my marriage too easily, but I don't regret my decision. Jonathan had 3 years to show me that our relationship was his priority, and instead he chose to participate in his mother's schemes to control and manipulate me. Some damage can't be undone, and some trust can't be rebuilt. I'm sharing this final update because I want other people in similar situations to know that you don't have to accept toxic behavior from your in-laws or your spouse. You don't have to sacrifice your peace of mind and self-respect to keep other people happy. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away and build a better life without the people who are determined to make you miserable. For anyone dealing with manipulative in-laws and unsupportive spouses, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're overreacting or being too sensitive when someone is treating you badly. You deserve to be with people who respect you and treat you well. That's the end of this story. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next.